Why employers are sick of Gen Z. Before this, I reacted to a video about how horrible it is. Like in 1958, I think, a man bought his house for $20,000 almost. And he was working in a factory, right? Meanwhile, now you have to have $150,000 in cash plus money, aside on your bank account or from mortgage, whatever, right? To be able to buy some house. Meanwhile, the median salary is 60 something thousand. And most people that have college degrees don't even work the job they got, the job that they should be working from college. So, and, the safety of company safety and company loyalty doesn't exist. Companies aren't investing into their employees. They're mostly worried about what do you call it? People that invest in those companies, shareholders. So obviously, after all of this, Gen Z is gonna be horrible to deal with. But let's see if he focuses on this or he just keeps saying Gen Z is lazy and wants everything to be easy. Let's see.
Starting to hate Gen Z, but why? What is so bad? A recent survey of 1,000 managers in the US found that more than half cite frustration and almost to the point of stress in managing Gen Z. Almost a third of those surveyed said that they would ideally avoid hiring a Gen Z candidate, and 18% have contemplated leaving their own job because they think managing Gen Z is too much. What is it about Gen Z that is making employers incredibly frustrated with them as a whole? Well, it's a few reasons. Well, the first is that this always happens. I mean, every generation faces the same lazy and entitled label until they become an elder generation. There's no doubt in my mind there's a massive component of that in this. Baby boomers were dubbed the me generation in the 1970s, and critics said that they were self-absorbed, they were pleasure-seeking, and unwilling to conform to traditional work norms. Despite being raised by the so-called self-sacrificing greatest generation, boomers were seen as rejecting discipline in favor of personal fulfillment. Gen X were the original slackers, branded cynical, aimless, and disloyal. They came of age during economic uncertainty and rising divorce rates. Media in the 90s labeled them as apathetic, unmotivated, too skeptical to care, too jaded to try. Millennials, I mean, same thing. I mean, Time Magazine, for example, did an iconic 2013 cover calling them narcissistic and entitled. They were accused of craving praise, avoiding hard work. And
if every generation is like this, after a few generations, wouldn't you ask yourself, is it the system making every generation like this? What is it? What's making every generation like this? Because blaming every new young generation being worse, well, who raised them? Who taught them? You know what I mean? I didn't become a criminal because luckily I've got good parents who aren't criminals. But somebody who was raised by criminals or absent parents or much worse, they might grow up being criminals or maybe something worse or, mentally ill people.
Traditional industries with their demand for flexibility and purpose. And is that too dissimilar from Gen Z? Because this is where we're at now, and they seem to be the most difficult generation to manage. Surveys show that hiring managers consider them entitled, soft, unprepared, quick to ask for more, slow to adapt.
Nobody asks why.
To workplace norms. Terms like quiet quitting and lazy girl jobs have fueled the backlash, and that is why I'm making this video today. The pattern repeats. The reality is that what each generation calls entitlement was often just the next generation adapting to a new economy, new technologies, and different values, but the script stays the same. They're lazy, and we don't like them. And this will honestly never stop. I mean, every generation has different tech, different stimulus, different ways of adapting to the world around it.
Inflation will always go up and everything will be more expensive and there's going to be less job safety and security. And you expect us to be like boomers? Also, back then, there were a lot of other issues and, let's not get into that.
As we're growing up in different worlds. And so as long as there's technological progress, there's social progress, and the advancement of humans, each and every new generation will just seem completely foreign to the generations that came before it, even though they're not really that dissimilar. A big reason why work ethic seems to be at the core of this generational divide that keeps showing itself is that in earlier generations, there wasn't a follow your passion narrative that there kind of is now. It was about showing up, doing what you were told, no matter how terrible that might be, and earning your place over time, often without feedback or mentorship or flexibility.
Yeah, but that actually gave you something to work with, enough money to, live a normal life. Now it doesn't. You know what I mean? Also, back then, employees actually were, shareholders. They held parts ownership of the company, right? Of the companies, not every company, but a lot of them. And then eventually, companies started prioritizing shareholders, and then this whole the whole reason why this is happening, you know, employees being seen as a expense is because of that, and it shifted. It shifted to what the hell will this billionaire that invested in my company think, and not how will these 500 people working for my company survive this month.
It's just like, this is the way it's done, do it. From their lens, watching a 24-year-old come straight out of school and demand remote work, mental health stipends, and purpose-driven projects, like, to them, it just sounds ridiculous. And if you understand that, well, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. So if every generation gets this kind of heat, why does it feel extra hot on Gen Z? The second reason is amplification. In previous decades, criticism of the youngest up-and-coming generation was always reserved for, some media spots, water cooler conversation, your uncle, your neighbor, whatever. They were sort of isolated one-off events. It was sort of like an understanding that, the young people are so lazy or whatever. But it wasn't like in your face as much. Now you have countless videos and memes and social media content online that amplify the difference between generations. And honestly,
true,
those kinds of videos and pieces of content do really well because people relate to one thing or another. You either think the next gen is lazy and silly, or you think the older gen is way out of touch, crusty, whatever, right? You align yourself with one and you poke fun at the other. And another facet to that is people want to know why previous generations or, newer generations see them so differently than they see themselves. A great example of that right now is the Gen Z stare trend. And this is something that's getting so much traction online, and essentially what it
I'm Gen Z. I'm born 2001, right? I'll be 25 in a month. This is so dumb. Gen Z stare. If somebody does this, they're just immature little dorks. That's it. They're not bad people. They just need to grow out of it. That's it. But Gen Z stare? Nah, bro. Either communicate or leave. Gen Z stare? Get the fuck out of my face, bro.
It's a neutral, expressionless look in social or work settings. Experts
or
like
basically looking like you don't have one functioning brain cell.
To the events of
I'm
2020,
criticizing them
perhaps,
too much.
Screen-based communication and shifting norms. But in my opinion, it seems like Gen Z is just having a really tough time hiding how dumb they think someone sounds, or how annoyed they think someone sounds, or confused they are, or whatever it is, right? And why is that? Why are they just so out in the open with what they're thinking visually? From an older perspective, it just reads as disrespect when you just blankly stare at somebody. It's like, don't do that, right? Many grew up in workplaces where eye contact, facial expressions, and
Yeah, but older generations talk behind your back a lot. Trust me. I've got grandparents, okay? I've got also parents. My parents are in their early 50s. They just turned 50, right? But still, they won't tell you a lot of stuff in your face, but they'll talk a lot behind your back. My grandparents, even worse. Me, just tell the person straight to their face and don't talk shit behind their back. You know what I mean? That's actually more respectful. And you're not gonna tell them, you fucking smell bad. You go F yourself. Go throw yourself from... No, you just tell them, hey, listen, man, this is not cool. This is not hygienic. It's, it's kind of embarrassing. You should probably, shower. You've got the money to go to a gym. Please don't stink in the gym. I've said that multiple times to people in the gym. I didn't get in trouble. I did get, a bad stare because how dare he tell me something. Come on, man. Don't stink in the gym. You've got money for the gym. You can shower in the gym. Just buy cologne. Not cologne. Fucking deodorant.
Confirmation were expected and honestly sometimes demanded. And if a younger employee doesn't mirror that, or worse, they just stare at them blankly like they're insane, it's taken as a challenge or a lack of effort. Whether that's fair or not, it certainly makes the relationship a lot different. The third reason, and honestly, this might be one thing that boomers have right, is that Gen Z is just not that great at communication.
That's true.
Or is that total nonsense? Gen Z's communication
I think
style
it
is
is
one of the most misunderstood aspects in today's workplace.
It's
And
a
the
lot of digital slop slang language, which I get because I live in the internet, but yeah.
truth is, honestly, it's a lot more nuanced than they're just bad at talking or they can't
Yeah.
hold a conversation. This will surprise literally nobody, but Gen Z, believe it or not, really excels in digital communication and is by
Digital.
far the most adept generation at communicating online.
As I said.
It's not even close. A Canadian survey found that 57% say remote work actually improved their writing skills, far, far, far outpacing boomers. And they're fluent in visual platforms and short form
Interesting.
messaging, multi-channel conversations. I mean, they are whizzes with communication on the digital front. They also place a high value on empathy and emotional intelligence, with many actively seeking
Selective empathy. Selective empathy. Based on their political beliefs. You'll see, left-leaning people will have empathy for certain people and certain tragedies and not for others. Same with right-leaning people. They will have empathy for certain stuff in certain situations and not. It's very. People are way too divided in politics and they forgot it that everybody's human and we need to find a middle ground. The problem is we will never find a middle ground because the opposites just getting more and more. Is polarizing the right word? They're just getting more and more extreme. That's what I wanted to say, I guess. And disagreeableness is the norm, and everybody tries to one-up each other instead of finding a middle ground in a normal society. Everybody wants it to be 100% how they believe it is. And also, they all have biased statistics.
to build soft skills, according to Deloitte. But face-to-face communication is where the gap becomes factually visible, and that's where employers are honestly having the toughest time with Gen Z. A Forbes survey found that 24% of Gen Z respondents said their verbal skills have worsened due to remote
I
learning
agree.
and working, compared to just 5% of boomers. In the office,
Not just that, but because a lot of younger folks don't really socialize in real life that much compared to before. You know what I mean? Like, I pay my bills online. You know what I mean? I can do most of my. I can buy groceries and have them delivered to my place online. I don't have to do most stuff in real life. You know, I can go to the gym at 3 a.m. Okay, that's still in real life, but at 3 a.m. nobody is in the gym.
this shows up in subtle but jarring ways. One example, again, is the Gen Z stare. I mean, it is a real thing. It's been interpreted
It's very
by older
dumb.
coworkers as maybe rude, disengaged, passive-aggressive. It's less about
Passive-aggressive.
attitude and more about the unfamiliarity with non-verbal workplace norms that weren't maybe learned in Zoom classrooms or something like that. I mean, it
True.
really is sort of a weirdness that boomers and older generations seem to feel. And, I don't think they're totally off base. And it's not a stretch to say that some Gen Zs are certainly not as great communicators in person as generations of the past. The thing is, the
That's
corporate
true.
of old was expected to speak up in meetings, to make phone calls, to project, to be great presenters.
The average Gen Zer, that's a what do you call it? An introvert, hates making calls. Like, they hate making calls for, like, I don't know, ordering something. Well, you can order something just on an app. You know what I mean? For example, you got to make a call for something.
That is how a lot of business is done, is being
Yeah.
front facing, confident, all those kinds of things. They had no choice but to develop these muscles if they wanted to move up the corporate ladder. So perhaps when they see a younger coworker send a Slack message to somebody that's a 10-second walk away or on the other side of the building where they could just go have a quick conversation and they'd rather avoid that confrontation or that chat, it does seem a little foreign to them. The less you use something, the less it gets developed. And honestly, the foundational years of 2020, 21, and 22 are showing that some of Gen Z's skills have
COVID effed up a lot of social skills to a lot of younger generations, including me. I think it's gonna be permanent. It can be fixed, but yeah, it's very hard to unlearn stuff that was practiced for many, many years, especially in your younger years, you know? Like, imagine if you ate mostly unhealthy for most of your childhood, it's gonna be very hard to, change that as an adult compared to if you were a healthy, active child because your parents, worked on that to make it better and easier for you when you're an adult, and you already have those habits in place.
atrophied when they should have been developing the most. The fourth reason why employers are struggling is honestly, Gen Z just doesn't really put up with a lot of stuff. They have a much higher standard for their employers, and they are significantly less tolerant of perceived injustices.
Well, the stakes are higher. It's harder to get a job, and even if you get a job, you have less purchasing power. So yeah,
them or to those around them. In some, they don't put up with the same BS that previous generations had to stomach.
I
And
don't.
they're not afraid to walk away from something if the expectations are not met. In fact, another Deloitte study found that the vast majority of Gen Z respondents said they would reject a job if the employer's values did not align with their own. And honestly, this is not just talk. I mean, this generation has
Mostly financial values. I don't care about most stuff.
unionization efforts at companies like Amazon and Starbucks and Google, pushing them for better pay, safety, and flexibility. Have they been very successful at that?
I don't know about that
not,
one.
but they're not afraid to challenge the system, even if it costs them job security. They're driving changes in what workers expect from their employers and what they'll no longer tolerate. This is also a generation that's hyper aware of injustice, and being raised on social media, they've seen a lot of nasty stuff. They're more likely to call out discrimination, inequality, mental health state loudly and publicly. That's going to make some employers uncomfortable.
That's very true, and that's good. But also, sometimes we overestimate something how bad it is, and we don't really try to look at the different perspective. A lot of different topics. Nobody's saying slavery was good. That shit was awful. Okay, I'm Slavic. My ancestry is like thousands of years of slavery. Okay, me being, my ancestors being enslaved. But I'm saying we need to look at multiple different perspectives. But depending on your political leaning, you're only looking at stuff from your perspective. You still try to make it better because you believe this is going to be better for everyone. So you have probably, depending on your political beliefs, you probably have the best meaning, and you probably wish the best for everybody in your country, specifically the United States. But still, I feel like people are way too close in their own bubble. And when they call out stuff, they a lot of times they ignore, or they don't recognize other opposing issues, if that even makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah, like I can give examples, but it's going to be way too much
Older generations
yapping.
were often taught that you earn your voice over time. They see it as disrespect when a 22-year-old pushes back on day 3. Not every job is toxic. Not every boss is abusive. Sometimes Gen Z might mistake hard work for unfair treatment.
That's true.
That can make it harder for older managers to coach and invest in them. The last big divide is remote work. Based on literally everything we've talked about in this video, and for obvious convenience reasons, Gen Z would strongly prefer to work remotely because they are much more well-suited and skilled to do so on average. But there's a caveat. While older generations had to adapt to digital tools, Gen Z came of age on them. So it makes sense that they're the ones pushing hardest for flexibility. Many say that they'd walk away from a job if it didn't offer at least some remote option, and it's hard not to see why. But here's where it gets misunderstood. A lot of them don't want to work fully remote. In fact, the majority prefer a hybrid setup that combines the focus of working from home with the connection and mentorship that happens in person. They're not trying to avoid the office entirely. They just want to use it more intentionally and for a purpose. It is very difficult for some employers to
I like this guy.
But yes, a lot of Gen Z folks actually do enjoy coming into the office every now and again to get out of the house and switch up their routine. It's when they have to commute 2 to 3 hours a day, every single day, where it becomes a lot more annoying. And from the older gen angle, I get it. We did it for 40 years. What makes you so special? To them, remote work still feels like a perk, something that is given, not granted. And when they hear younger workers complain about going into the office every day during the week, it genuinely feels like entitlement. In my opinion, honestly, this whole thing can be boiled down to collaboration, right? There's brilliant, wonderful people in every generation. I mean, that's an obvious thing. But I think so many of these people that complain on both sides, like people complaining about boomers, people complaining about Gen Z, just are non-empathetic to how things were for the older gens or the younger gens, right? Like, it's just two completely different worlds. And so if you can understand that Gen Z has developed a much different skill set, but a really, really advanced and modern skill set that can leverage and help you grow your company.
Oh,
God knows
bro,
how big.
here's the issue, man. And go and like and subscribe to New Money Nate. Bro, what, 15,000 subs? 15, bro, you deserve minimum 100,000 subs. This was a great video. Go and like, subscribe to him. What he said with the remote work stuff, yeah, most people these days want to have the comfortable. I'm making videos, you know what I mean? I still have other stuff I do for money, but just because my software job was paying me literally minimum, I'm not joking, minimum wage. I was at the worst software company that only employed juniors, barely trained us, and just paid us minimum wage. And it's a failing company, obviously. But it is what it is. Not everybody can work remotely. Blue collar work is the backbone of every country. Maintaining sewage pipes, sewers, maintaining roads, building roads, and other infrastructure. You know what I mean? Maintaining and building bridges. People that work in the services. That shit. I mean, I'm not seeing people that work in the services as in the hospital. They're not blue collar, but you know what I mean, right? You can't work remotely as a cop or a doctor. You can't. You never will be, okay? Oh, you can operate a robot? The robot eventually is going to operate itself. Then you won't be a policeman if we get to that point. So there's a lot of nuances. He didn't really talk about, you know, how life is way more expensive and harder in different ways than it was back then. And the stricter, more closed off rules and personalities would thrive more back then. And just work in a factory or that random job, you'll have everything. Just shut up, don't question authority, you'll have everything you need, and that's it. Now, that's not how it is. You cannot question authority, you can be censored, you can do everything you have to do, you still won't have enough, you won't get any, you know, stakes from the company, as in you won't hold any stocks from the company. They won't give you that. They want only shareholders that give them lots of money. They won't give you anything more than the basic minimum wage job, and you still won't be able to buy most things. And also financial literacy, and all of that combined with it, and more people being more aware of discrimination in different ways and different issues, right? Depends on what you see as discrimination. If you're left or right leaning, I don't care. This is not that kind of a video, right? That makes them more radicalized. And then being more radicalized because of money, because of past and, well, today's tensions and issues, political, social, and so on, makes them this way, makes them function and behave this way. More of my generation doesn't vote and hates all politicians, even if they are a mix of right and left-leaning politics, which I am. I'm a mix of left and right, and I never vote for right or left-leaning politicians where I'm from, because they're all the same evil douchebags. Yeah, anyway, tell me what you think in the comments. If you actually watched this video till this point, because barely anybody watches my videos till the end, like and subscribe, tell me what you think. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.